So we're at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here instead of 3. Let's see how that goes. See if that fits with my schedule better. And here to talk about Warhammer! Warhammer Fantasy. Everybody's favorite fantasy world. If it's not your favorite fantasy world, just, watch more of these and read more about it. And hope it'll become your favorite fantasy world. uh, especially if you like anything that's gritty at all. It's one of the things that I love about the Warhammer world and why I fell in love with it was that it's not your standard high fantasy. Yes, there's magic, yes, there's dragons and stuff like that, but it's on a much smaller scale. The wizards there are sometimes. It's not like every adventuring party is going to have a wizard. Obviously, we have somebody that can do magic on a Grim Podcast or Perilous Adventure, but there's a very good chance, especially if the whole team just rolls for their careers, that you might not have somebody that can do magic, and that's fine. Like I said, it's one of the things I love about this world in this game is that it's just you're kind of regular people thrown in these crazy situations and hope that you survive. But there's lots of awesome fantastical elements as well, or else it, wouldn't be a fantasy. So this week I'll be talking about Lizardmen. I would say we because I assume there's going to be some chat in the chat here, and then Lizardmen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Lizardmen of Lustria, a little bit about the Southlands. There's not much there about the Southlands, and we'll talk about, of course, a book, my Black Library recommendation. But first up, as always, is what's gaming. What's going on in my gaming world. Love to hear what's going on in your gaming world in the chat as well. Last night, Tim and Danny and I recorded a special, trying something new and different, starting to look at like reviewing our first impressions in this case of different RPG books for the games that we play. Besides Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, we also have the Lost Omens podcast, so we're talking about the Pathfinder 2. So last night we talked about the brand new Lost Omens Ancestry Guide, which is really cool. Which is kind of funny. I just talked about how much I love the Warhammer world because it's very low fantasy and not crazy stuff. Pathfinder is basically as opposite of it as you can get. Like you can't get too much more high fantasy than Galarian and Pathfinder, where you can literally play an android, or a Strix, the person with wings. You can play a flesh warp, which are really cool. All kinds of things. So we had a good time doing a kind of first impression of that, what we thought of the book so far, things that stuck out to us, and that'll be up on YouTube soon. That's about it for what's gaming. Tomorrow we got, of course, the Power Phase right here on this Twitch, twitch.tv/Professional Casual Network, for those of you listening later. Tomorrow, Tim and I are trying out the counterattack list. I'm giving the Wargaming Dad, listener, follower, giving him some data using at a list that he talked about on a different podcast, the Danger Room podcast for MCP, and see how that goes. So the whole idea is that everybody except the leader, because I need an affiliation, so I'm using Avengers to make their counterattacks cheaper. So everybody but Captain America has some kind of counterattack superpower where you hit me, I'll hit you back. And I think in every case it only costs 1 power, which is pretty cool. So they'll pretty much always be able to do it. We'll see how that goes. Try to make Tim uncomfortable, make him think about attacking these guys that are holding objectives. So I've got Captain America, I've got Sabretooth, first time I'm using Sabretooth. I've got Venom, who we used a lot when we first started the channel, the stream, who's taking a back seat lately, but he's coming back. Got MVP Hawkeye, and then Black Widow from the core set, the 2-point Black Widow, because she's awesome, and she's got a counterattack as well. So I'm really excited to see how that goes. All right, we're here to hear about Warhammer. So the Black Library recommendation of the week. Forgot what that little segment of the show was called for a minute. Talking about Lizardmen. I don't know of any books specifically about Lizardmen, but there are a few that take place in places like Lustria that feature the Lizardmen heavily. So today I want to talk a little bit about The Burning Shore, which I remember when I first picked this one up. This is by Robert Earl. I believe this is from the early 2000s. I forgot to look up the publication date, but I think it's like 2003. And you're like, oh, cool, Lizardmen book, because it's got this awesome Saurus on the cover. It looks great. and then it heavily features the Lizardmen. It is the first of the Florin and Lorenzo series, which are a couple of Bretonnian rogues who are on the run, and they kind of stow away on this ship that happens to be bringing a substantial army to the south, to Lustria, which is essentially Warhammer, South America, and they kind of get conscripted because they're there, and they're basically there to go try to do some plundering, find some treasure. Yeah, Bastion says Sabretooth and Venom are famous for teaming up with Captain America. Yeah, I'm throwing that stuff out the window for this game. They're still Avengers because I got Cap, Hawkeye, and Black Widow, but yeah, throwing in some other weird allies. But yeah, Florin and Lorenzo joined this group. A couple of things. I read this book a long time ago. Luckily, JB from, Bruno from a Grim Podcast, A Perilous Adventure, just recently finished it. So I was asking him for some more details this morning to help refresh my memory. And the main things I remembered about this one was this weird, like, jungle highway where there was, like, this, like, road down the middle of the jungle where everything was just flattened and it was, like, squared off for things to travel through. So the army takes advantage of this, of course. And I thought that was really cool and weird that the Lizardmen make these, like, tunnels through the jungle, through the foliage, because otherwise it's almost impassable. It's so thick with growth. Also, the Slandmage Priests, I'll talk about when we get to the lore focus, is that how they describe their magic is really, really cool. How it's almost mathematic instead of the way they manipulate the winds of magic. They talk about running algorithms in their head and thinking about the logs of different things and then manipulating the winds that way and then having it realize in the real world. Really cool stuff. But this one's great for just high adventure and showing a lot of different things in the world. The army that Florin and Lorenzo join it's made up of Bretonnians, it's made up of dwarf engineers with like cannon and stuff. It's made up of, I think there's some Imperial Knights and things like that. And it's just a cool story. At one point, Florin gets captured, but the Slan wants to learn things from him, so he tells Asaurus not to eat him because they're carnivores. They're going to eat him if they can. And it's a fun story with a fun lead, because he's kind of Florin is kind of a like Han Solo. Oh, how did JB describe him? I said because he's like a Han Solo sort, right? He's kind of a rogue. He's kind of not a great dude, but he's kind of funny in his own way. And he said he's like like of the nobility, where his Lorenzo is actually his butler that he takes with him, who's kind of more like a rogue of the people and kind of helps to ground Florin and whatnot. But Burning Shore is great fun. It's the first of a couple. There's a couple different Florin and Lorenzo books. I know there's a short story about them bringing some like dinosaur eggs back to Bretonnia, which is really cool. And then there's another one, I think it's called The Dark City or something like that, which I haven't gotten a chance to read yet, but I certainly will sometime in the future because I do really like these characters. They're fun. Just kind of the scoundrels that people like. So highly recommend The Burning Shore. Real fun adventure. And just it's got cool Lizardmen stuff and a bunch of different characters. I know there's a sweet celestial wizard who likes to rain down comets and things. Who learns about the Slan. That is the recommendation for the week. The Burning Shore by Robert Earl. All right. So the whole reason people are here, I assume, is the lore focus of the week, which is, like I said, Lizardmen. Originally, it was just going to be Lustria. I was going to talk about the continent of Lustria, which I think in the future I'll do as a separate episode talking about the different things that are there. But instead, I want to go through all the major players in the Warhammer world first, kind of taking it, week by week that way, which I was working on talking with people to be special guests. I forgot to mention about for March, we're doing a little promotion for the show. Patrons at the I forget what I said before. I'm going to go and say at the $5 tier and above, will be able to guest star in the show and join me like I did with Taylor a couple weeks ago talking about Ogre Kingdoms. And we'll pick a topic of your choice. I gave a list of the things I was going to talk about in the future and kind of let people choose. Bastion's going to join me next week to talk about Bretonnia. Yes. A week after that, Dagna will be joining me to talk about Chaos, which I can't believe I'm not going to talk about Chaos until like episode 13. Should have done Skaven then, just for the number, but we'll talk about Chaos in general. We'll talk about kind of the 4 different gods, what they represent, what kind of Chaos brings to the table in the Warhammer world. And then the last 2 slots, I think there's 2 more Sundays in March, can be filled by whoever. 1, 2, 3. Yes, there are 4. So we got 2 more spaces available for people if they want to guest on the show and talk about whatever. I just saw Bastion also said, so much to make a campaign about something like that. I'm assuming you mean the Southlands? Because, yep, that's coming up soon. We've got, we did our first recording session of Settling the Southlands, which is going to be our Patreon exclusive actual play for a campaign that I am creating and making up a ton of stuff about the Southlands, because there's not much out there at all. We have like one map from forever ago showing some major places in the Southlands, but that's about it. Like, there's really not much going on in terms of what we know about the Southlands. So it's been fun to just make up my own little corner of the Warhammer world. Obviously, it's nothing like official or anything like that. It's just my own creations. Super pumped for that, and that'll be coming out. I'm going to hesitantly say potentially April. We'll be releasing. That'll be launching. I'm hoping, as long as scheduling recording can work out and we can get far enough ahead that we can keep it weekly without worrying about missing recording, because we're doing those in big installments, recording a number of episodes at once, because there's only so much time and all of us have other jobs, have jobs. This is just for funsies, so hoping to get that out relatively soon because we're really enjoying it. People, the characters are amazing so far, and can't wait to see where things go. So if you're looking for more Warhammer Fantasy content like that, there we go. All right, so we're talking about Lizardmen. So we got to talk about Lustria, right? Like I said before, this is essentially Warhammer South America. We'll blow up this map a little bit. I believe this map is from the 8th edition Lizardmen book, which I don't have. I never got that one. I didn't realize until I was looking on my shelf that I had the book for 7th edition, but it still looks brand new. So I never played Lizardmen, but I must have more or less glanced through it and read a bit of it. But it's been kept in pretty good condition over the years because it's from 2008, so it seems ancient now. But obviously, looking at this map of Lustria, it looks very much like South America, same general shape. We see the northern part here looks very similar to Central America, with that very narrow sliver of land connecting it to Nagaroth. We talked about briefly with Dark Elves. So if you're talking about the old world, Lustria is very far away, right? You're going to go southwest thousands of miles. Very dangerous journey to travel there by ship. Most places, most of the time, they don't even make it there, and it's just a dangerous place in general. There is a settlement, so I can find it on the map here, called Skeggy. I'm not seeing it there. Oh, which is a settlement of mostly humans. That's really strange. I'm not seeing it on this map, but you know. Huh. Maybe they changed that over time to where it's not. That's really weird. That's something. Back in the day, there was this sweet book just called Lustria that had a brand new campaign in it that was really cool. It had rules for all kinds of stuff to play in the New World. It came with a campaign called Conquest of the New World, which is a really cool map-based campaign. Had all kinds of sweet rules, how to move around the map. Because the big thing with this book was it was essentially a campaign book, which we don't really get anymore. They had all kinds of rules about how to play a map-based campaign, and you'd move around the map, and when your pieces collided, you would have to fight, pretty much. Super cool. I remember starting it in college twice, and both times it petering out after just a couple weeks, unfortunately. But it had a really, really cool premise. Like I said, Lustria is essentially Warhammer South America. It's mostly thick, thick jungle. According to this map, we can see a range of mountains that covers pretty much the entire length of the continent, which would be equivalent to the Andes. In our world, we do see some desert areas and some more like blasted waste type areas. We have lots of names of places on here, but Lustria never got super developed because it's more or less considered like, quote, uncivilized. We don't have places like the Empire. It's a lot of Lizardmen, but there are other people that live here. There's a big issue with clans Pestilence, Skavens tried to take over Lustria, and just really cool stuff there. So the actual continent is mostly where the Lizardmen are from. If we look at our whole world map from, I like to keep on here to bring up here and there, we can see the Southlands right smack dab in the middle, the south of the very middle, which is another place where Lizardmen are known to frequent. Definitely can't see that map well enough to see if Skeggy is included. Maybe it's something I made up. I don't know. I swear there was a settlement on the like northeastern edge of Lustria in the New World area called Skeggy that was mostly humans that had traveled there and were able to set up a little bit of like a beachhead in the continent. Again, maybe that got retconned after some time. But the Lizardmen themselves are super cool. So the main thing with Lizardmen is that they are led by the Slandmage Priests, which are these big old toad dudes, and they are super smart, and they are the best mages in the world. Essentially, they can do more with just the movement of a little finger than a trained wizard from the Empire could do if they are a master, a wizard lord. They are incredibly powerful. They are considered one of the, let's see, Skeggy was there. It was a reference to Skegness, a famous British seaside town. Okay, thank you, Bastion. So I just couldn't see it on that map, or it wasn't quite on that map, but yeah, that was part of the lore of Lustria. But Slandmage Priests are just what they say. They're mages of the utmost ability, and they are also the priests and spiritual leaders of the Lizardmen, and basically they control everybody around them. They are incredibly powerful telepaths that they don't really talk, they just speak directly in your mind with their own mind. They control a lot of the Lizardmen around them. The Lizardmen aren't completely like automatons. They do have some free will to a degree, but they can be instantly taken over by the Slan and do whatever it wants. Slan are masters at manipulating the winds of magic without much without much effort, I guess is the word. Some mage priests are known to remain motionless for decades or even centuries, and the only way what they have to do to manipulate the winds of magic are tiny movements, sometimes in their face or fingers, in order to cast spells. Fashion says they are also, quote, high AF, which is pretty true. They love their different smoking of different herbs and things like that help to connect them back to their creators, the old ones. Which thing that's really interesting about Lizardmen is that they're essentially aliens. They came here. The Slan. There's some hints that the Slan came with the old ones, or they were like an offshoot sort of the old ones. There were Slan early on in 40k lore, which were just bipedal frog people that were essentially the same as the Slans in Warhammer, just more mobile. So there's some connection between them as well. They're kind of seen as like the agents of the old ones in the Warhammer world. They just don't tell anybody anything. They really only ever talk to other Slan. Some of them are powerful enough to send their thoughts telepathically over hundreds of miles to other Slan temple cities and kind of coordinate things and whatnot, which makes their armies terrifyingly efficient because they can just telepathically control their troops, tell them where to go. They don't have to worry about the signaling and orders getting confused or anything like that. Thing I love about Slan is that they ride these like floating palanquins. So they have these chairs that they just float around on using their magics and telekinesis, so they don't have to actually get up. And they're almost always surrounded by a bunch of Saurus. The next kind of Lizardmen will talk about the warrior class of Lizardmen called Saurus, which are big old chonky boys. They're really, really strong. They're covered in scales, thick scales like armor. You can see they don't really wear armor because they don't need to. They've already got it naturally. They have those big bone crests coming off the top of their head to protect their small brains. And they are, again, they have free will, but they are mostly told what to do by Skinks and by the Slandmage Priests. And they are consummate warriors and predators, and they're just kind of awesome. I've always absolutely adored the look of Saurus warriors. I think they look amazing, and they look different enough from things like lizard folk from other fantasy settings. They have their own aesthetic for sure. I love their like gold and obsidian weapons. Their shields are made of scales of bigger dinosaur type creatures with golden or bronze or brass, whatever it might be, adornments, and their shields are as much of a weapon as their actual weapons. They're covered in spikes and blades and things like this. Not besides the fact that they can bite you and they've got big strong tails they can hit you with, Saurus are pretty terrifying as warriors, and they're very, very good at it. They're not the quickest. Think about like a I almost said Stegodon. That's the Lizardmen thing. Stegosaurus with its walnut-sized brain. Saurus are not great at like complex tasks. They can take simple directions very easily and do it. And as they get older, they become things like Scar veterans. And then eventually, if they continue to rise up in the ranks and survive and get even older, because they can live a long time. Think about like in our world, a turtle or tortoise can live hundreds of years potentially, 150, 200 years or more. Saurus are kind of similar. Some of them can live a long, long time. And as they get older, their scales get tougher, they get stronger. Eventually, they can become what's called an old blood, and they are some of the greatest warriors in the world. What's really neat about the Lizardmen is that a lot of it is predetermined. They have like spawning pools that they kind of come out of. They're not really hatched from eggs like you might expect them to be since they're reptilian. They come out of these spawning pools, and it's all about what was put into the spawning pool. Basically, the skinks kind of maintain these things, and it's kind of decided at more or less at spawning what they're going to be. Sometimes just one Saurus comes out of the spawning pool, which means they're going to be a consummate warrior. Eventually, will be a Scar veteran or Old Blood. They have been created to lead the armies and things like that. If you get a bunch of Saurus out at once, they're just Saurus warriors. If you get a few Saurus out, then you get Temple Guard, which are Saurus that are a little bit better equipped. They typically wield long halberds that look just like their weapons with like the toothed edges. And they wear a little bit more armor. They typically wear like skull helms that look really cool, and they are created specifically to protect the Slan. That is their one job. That is their literally the meaning of their creation. They are created to protect the Slan, and if the Slan does go to war with them, they will almost exclusively go to war within a unit of Temple Guard to protect the Slan, because he is the single most important part of their culture, their society, not only their army, but everything else. Saurus, really cool. Love these guys. Always wanted to play Lizardmen. Never did because other people I knew did. I mentioned a couple times the Skinks. I love Skinks too. They're so great. So the Skinks are, I mean, the name is taken right from a type of lizard that's usually found in South America called Skinks. Obviously, they are smaller, they are quicker, they are smarter than Saurus. They can still be warriors, but they're just not as effective as Saurus. They're not as strong, they don't have as thick scaling, but they are very, very fast. They can solve complex problems much better than Saurus, and they are much more dexterous, and they typically are the ones building things, or at least telling the Saurus how to build things and whatnot. And they are the keepers of the spawning pools, and they are the attendants to the Slan, and some of them can actually wield magic themselves. You can have Skink Priests also, who can manipulate the winds of magic in their own right. Again, from the spawning pools, if you get a bunch of Skinks, they're just going to be your warriors and like servants. If you get one Skink or a couple, they might be the Skink Chiefs that will lead that can lead armies or contingents of skinks, or you might get a skink priest who can manipulate things like I believe it was only heaven's magic that they could manipulate, so they could do things like call down lightning and comets and things like that, and they're really cool. Manipulate time and space is kind of the realm of the lore of heavens. Skink priests and things are always really cool, and I love the look of these little dudes. They look like lizards with softer edges than the saurus. They don't have as many spikes and whatnot. They always have a crest coming down from the top of their head like a fin. And I thought it was really cool. I was reading a little bit about them earlier just to get some more extra information, and that they communicate by subtle changes in their scale color and their crest, in addition to little bits of clicks as their language. They don't speak like we would think. And saurus basically don't talk at all. They just kind of do what they're told all the time. They talk a little bit to each other in skinks with grunts and clicks, but their language is very rudimentary because their brain is rudimentary compared to skinks, and kind of the only way to say it. So skinks are great. Love skinks. They're always a pain in games. When I played a lot of fantasy in college, a roommate of mine, Murphy, was really, really good, especially with skinks. He loved how they are skirmish fighters, so they didn't rank up in those blocks like everybody else. They were spread out a bit more, and their movement shenanigans were a pain in the butt. They could have javelins they could throw, or blow dart guns they could shoot at you, and just the way they could move around, they were very difficult to pin down to be able to charge, because they could just move out of your line of sight so easily, and then just pepper you with javelins and blowguns just to be a pain and take down a couple of guys here and there, and then wait for the Slan to hit you with some magic, and the Saurus to smash into your lines and wreck you. Really, really good army. One thing I've always found really funny about Lizardmen and Skinks is that the closest relative to Skinks is not Saurus. It's actually their big old cousins, the Kroxigor, who I love. As we know, I love the big dudes. Kroxigor are like the ogres of the Lizardmen, or the like Minotaurs are to Beastmen. You've got Kroxigor for the Lizardmen. They're gonna be like twice as tall as a Saurus. They look similar. Their facial structure typically looks a bit more like crocodilian, I guess you could say, or more like an alligator kind of thing. Sometimes, depending on the artist as well and the rendition of the model, sometimes they just look like a T-Rex head. But Kroxigors are the big, heavy hitters for the army, and they are there as shock troops. The thing I love about them is that they are very, very closely linked with the Skinks, to the point where pretty much every rendition of the army had some kind of rule where the Kroxigors could just join skink units and be in the unit and just stand like in the middle ranks and swing over the skinks, and the skinks and the Kroxigors just had this like innate understanding of who was going to do what. Not quite telepathy, but just this like genetic link that they knew what each other was going to do. Other editions had it simplified where like you could have Kroxigors charge through a skink unit, and as if the skinks weren't there, because the skinks would just move out of the way enough for the Kroxigors to rush through as they charge something, and then they would rank back up kind of thing, or get back into their formation or whatever it was. And I just love that the big guys and the littlest guys have this close link, where the Saurus and Kroxigors just didn't. They were just different weapons for the Slan. Love these guys. Kroxigor are really cool, and they had that kind of same theme that a lot of the armies had, where they were the big dudes that wielded great weapons, right? They had the two-handed things. I love this image I got up here of him just holding this huge mace that's spiked on the end. Like, if you're hit with that, you're done. You are done. They also were able to they had a big old mouth to bite you with, and they got a tail to thwap you with. They were nasty buggers. Talking about big guys, though, let's get bigger. We've got everybody's favorite, the Carnosaur, which is kind of like the Warhammer T-Rex, but with bigger arms. And they are just big old dinosaurs, predators of Lustria and the Southlands. And often, the only way you could take them in the army was if they were a mount for a Saurus, Scar Veteran, or I think it maybe even had to be an Old Blood. So, like, the mightiest of Saurus warrior leaders would be able to ride a Carnosaur. They could tame it. Slan might do some psychic stuff to it, but then you could have this awesome dinosaur type warrior riding a giant dinosaur. Like, come on. So awesome. I love these guys. They had some sweet rules where, like, if the Carnosaur got hit, he got frenzied because he'd get, like, this blood frenzy like a shark, and he just wanted to eat things, chomp them up, and the old blood on the back was terrifying. Luckily for me, Murphy never had a model of this, so I never had to deal with it, but old bloods on foot were some of the nastiest combat characters in the game already. Throwing them on a Carnosaur was just awful. Didn't want to deal with it. Terrifying. They were so good. Loved it. And just the image of it is just so crazy great. You're probably thinking, no, I said we want big monsters. Go bigger. How about the Bastiodon? Love these guys. They're like the Mumax in Lord of the Rings when they took an oily font and then put a howdah on its back and all these dudes. That's kind of what's going on with the Bastiodon for Skinks. And they would ride this. It's like a giant ankylosaurus with these huge scales, the armor plates on its back, so it was like the toughest thing out there. And it's the size of a regiment of another army, and it's got a bunch of skinks on its back. And there were two different ways you could field it in the tabletop game, where you could give it a big crystal laser, which is just awesome, or you could give it these like snake pods, which would just like release venomous snakes around it, and it was disgusting and awesome. Unfortunately, Bastiodons came out right about the end of when we stopped playing fantasy as regularly or after college. My friend Murphy never had the chance to use Bastiodons when we played because they didn't come out till 8th edition, but they are so awesome. They just look so cool. It's just, ugh, that releasing the snakes out of there is so gross and amazing. Love it, love it. I know. I said big monsters. All right, we'll get to the big boy here finally. How about the Stegodon, or if you're Steve from Mini Wargaming, the Stegatron? This is the biggest boy of them all. Again, I guess model-wise, the Carnosaur, the newest model, was bigger, but at the time, back in 8th and 9th edition, or 7th and 8th edition, the Stegodon was the biggest. And it had a couple of different variants, of course. This is like a giant Triceratops with some more horns on its face, because why not? It's fantasy. And it would just plow through everything, kind of like a chariot, but it was a monster. It had a howdah on its back, a bunch of skinks that would have like javelins and blow darts from there too, and throw it at you. And then 8th edition improved on that, where you could have two different variants of Stegodons, where one had a giant bow, so they had like a big old, like a bolt thrower, giant crossbow on the back, like a ballista. That's what I was looking for, that the skink could fire from the back of the Stegodon. And then they also had the Engine of the Gods, which was really cool. It was like this arcane technology that a skink, you had to, when you had if there was an Engine of the Gods on the back of the Stegodon, there was also a Skink Priest who would kind of power it. This was heavily similar idea to the Orcs and Goblins with their Ragnarok spider, with their well, you could have a Goblin Shaman on the back with a spider web totem thing. I forgot what it's called, but I love the Engine of the Gods as basically this conduit for magic, and it could do all kinds of weird stuff. It had bounce spells in it. It could do other kind of random things similar to the what's the Skaven one called? The bell that they would push on a big chariot type thing. Oh, I forgot what it's called. The big bell. Bastion, what's the bell? The Bell of Doom? No. Something like that. Doom Bell? No, it's a Doom Wheel. But the same kind of idea where it could just kind of do these awesome, more or less random magical things to the table and just mess up your opponent's day. And if the Stegodon charged into combat, it was still nasty. It is the Doom Bell. Okay, I thought that sounded right. There was the Doom Bell and the Doom Wheel. It's been too long. But yeah, same kind of idea here, except it was a unit on its own. It didn't go in a unit because it was self-propelled because it's a big monster. I love Stegodons. I actually bought one. The only Lizardmen model I have is a Stegodon. If I can grab it real quick. Because I was going to play a Lizardmen army at one point, and I was going to make them pink just for fun. Bear with me here a second, especially podcast listeners. Here we go. So I never did get around to like finishing it, but I've got this. Let's get rid of the picture as we hold up this model of a pink Stegodon. Maybe someday I'll finish it to display it or sell it. If you want a piece of Warhammer made by the GM of the Grim Podcast and Perilous Adventure, here's an eBay. I don't know. Maybe someday. Super cool. So I was building it as the Engine of the Gods. So I got the other pieces here with his big old howdah going together. So I can remember which way it goes. A bunch of skinks. I think I put on bases for painting them, but they were all going to be pink. We got a guy with a spear or a javelin here he's going to throw over the side. That kind of thing. Yeah, and here's you can have a chieftain on top of it. I think it came with enough pieces to make a separate model. Is going to have a chieftain on foot as well. Here's the shaman. He's really cool looking with his he's got like a big old bird skull as a helmet, and he's got a cool staff. So he'd be the one powering the Engine of the Gods. So yeah, maybe I'll finish painting that. Remember, I had a base. I don't seem to have it here, that I was going to make up to make it look like the Stegodon was crossing a river on the model. Make it like a little diorama. So maybe I'll finish that up. Maybe we'll do something with that. Oh, there we go. Screaming Bell. Thank you, Bash. I'm assuming you looked it up or if it just popped in your head. Screaming Bell. And it was something like that. Very cool. So yeah, the Engine of the Gods was kind of similar to that in the way that it worked and kind of the theme of it. But yeah, that's pretty much Lizardmen. There are a couple other things in there. You got things like Chameleon Skinks, a variation of skinks that look like chameleons, and they could change their coloration to really blend in. They were really cool because they had things like ambush or scouting, or they had something different than other skinks, and they were like masters of poison blow darts. Well, their variants were there. I want to talk a little bit about some of the special characters, the named characters, because Lizardmen had the best. Then just the names. I was going through some of them earlier with Danny as we were talking. I was talking to her while I was doing some prep work, and it's just so ridiculous in the best way. So I was going to talk about each of these as I went through the different types of Lizardmen. And I just kind of forgot. Let's look at the Skinks first. So they have some awesome named characters. So there's speaking of Chameleon Skinks, that's the word I just said. There's Oxyatl, the survivor of Pahuax the Returned. Who was just kind of cool. It was nice when they added this guy just to give more variety in the special characters. It wasn't just Saurus and Slan and your basic skink warriors. They even had a Chameleon Skink special character who was cool. Next one's one of my favorites of all time. It was a skink chief who rode a pterodon. I forgot about pterodon riders, and then later they added ripperdactyls, who just have the best, awesome name. Skinks that ride flying dinosaurs as mounts. But there's the Master of the Skies, the Eye in the Heavens, Tic-Tac-Toe himself. If you don't believe me, check out the video version. I'm showing you right from the book. Tic-Tac-Toe. T-I-K-T-A-Q''T-O. Tic-Tac-Toe. So, some people don't like it. I think it's hilarious, and I love it. And his mount is named Zwup. It's so great. There's Teto Echo. That's just a fun name. It was unfortunate. The time of 7th edition, every book had a bunch of new special characters and whatnot, and most of them didn't get models for whatever reason. I don't know. It was this time. I think it was 5th edition of 40K as well, maybe 6th. They did the same thing where they came out with a bunch of special characters for every army. A lot of them didn't get models, and then they were left out of future books, which was really too bad. Teto Echo was really cool. He was a Skink Priest special character. Who was all about, he had his own little palanquin, he wanted to be a Slan. There's Tenehuane. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. That's how I'm going to do it. He was the prophet of Sotek, which is kind of like their serpent warrior god. He was really cool. He had like a 10 Commandments type block he would bring with him. The Saurus special characters were always really cool because they were just awesome warriors. There was Gorok, the great white lizard, who was just a big, strong dude. I don't think he got a model ever. Checkax was really awesome. He did get a model. He was like a Temple Guard special character who had this big old mace, the Starstone mace that he would just bludgeon people with. And he had what is it the key to the eternity chamber he has that allows him to like stop time? Yeah, so he would move like super fast because time would slow down around him, but he would be able to move through it normally. So it would be like everybody else is moving through pea soup, and he would just bludgeon people with this mace. I liked him a lot. His model was really cool. I forget if it was. Do they have a picture of it in this book? Yeah, Chick X, the Eternity Warden, is whoop. Nope, other page. There we go. Point out the right one. Hard to tell in this book. Look up Check X, the Eternity Warden. He had a really cool model. And then everybody's favorite, probably my personal favorite special character was Croak, another Saurus Old Blood. He's called the Ancient Scar Leader and the Last Avenger of Jotil, or Jotil. And he was your awesome Saurus riding a Carnosaur. And his Carnosaur, you ready for this? His name was Grimlock, which is just awesome on so many levels. And he had this awesome magic spear, and he had this thing called the Hand of the Gods, where he wore like kind of like Lionel's glove, which was like this special weapon that just went over his hand, and he had a magic spell from it and whatnot. And I love this guy. His model was awesome for the longest time, and then they redid the Carnosaur model, and it was still awesome, just bigger and kind of more awesome, and you could still have Croak. And then we have two awesome Slandmage Priests special characters, Lord Mazdamundi, he had his own spell called the Ruination of Cities, where he could just, because he was known for destroying his own temple city to keep, I believe it was Skaven from taking over. Double checking here. I can't remember who exactly it was that they were fighting again. Maybe it was Chaos, but yeah, he has a spell that can just rain down destruction from the sky to the point where he can destroy whole temple cities on his own. So he's one of the most he's the more proactive of is the most proactive of the Slan. He actually goes out and does things instead of just waiting for things to happen and then reacting to it, which the Slan are known for because they spend so much time meditating. Sometimes they miss what's happening in the present because they're looking at the future and seeing what's going to happen, or like using their mathematics to figure out what could possibly happen in the future. Sometimes they miss things that are happening in the present. And the skink attendants have to be like, hey, wake up. Hey, we're being attacked right now. You missed this because you're too busy looking even further ahead. And then the last special character who's super cool just because his name, he's the Venerable Relic Priest and the Deliverer of Itza. This is Lord Croak, which is just a great name on so many levels. I have heard some people argue that it's actually Lord Croak because it's Kroak. I think Lord Croak is funnier because he's a big frog who also happens to be dead. His body died long ago, but his spirit was so strong that it just stayed in the body even though it's dead, so it's mummified. But Lord Croak is still there. He wears a big death mask to kind of help keep his spirit within it. That's why they say in the High Elf book, they specify that Teclis was the most powerful living mage because Lord Croak is technically dead. And I guess Nagash and whatnot counts and not demons, but Teclis is the most powerful living mage only because the best of the Slandmage Priests is actually dead, but still there. Love it. Love it. I love the Lizardmen. Maybe someday, hopefully with the old world game coming out someday in the future, I would definitely think about jumping into Lizardmen because they are just cool. Like, you get to play with toy dinosaurs. What's not cool about that? Right? So a little bit about the Southlands as opposed to Lustria. There's Lizardmen there too. Mostly on the eastern part of the continent, but unfortunately in terms of like official material, there's almost nothing about the Southlands. I'm saying I'm making up pretty much everything. We know there are some people that live there. We have basically one map that was produced by them that shows us a couple places and gives us some general ideas, but I've been having a lot of fun looking at different African lore and coming up with different things that can kind of like Warhammerize it and just turn that into the Settling the Southlands campaign. But yeah, so next week will be Bretonnia with friend of the network Bastion. Will be joining me remotely since he can't come to my basement next week, I don't think, since he lives across the pond. If he could, that would be super cool. But obviously that's not really in the realm of possibility. And we'll be taking a look at Bretonnia, looking at the Knights of the Realm and all of that, the different things going on there. Bretonnia is cool. We got a lot of happening there. We can talk about things like the Red Keep, talk about Musion, talk about. You can bring about Genevieve a little bit. Hopefully, I will have finished Beasts in Velvet as part of our Discord that you can get access to with the Patreon. That one you can unlock for as little as even our lowest tier, $1 a month. And we've been doing a book club every month. Since January we started. We started with Drakenfels, and this February was Beast in Velvet, which is interesting because it's labeled as Genevieve the Vampire Book 3, but I'm pretty sure it was written right after Drakenfels, and then I think the second book in that series was written later to take place in between or something. I'm not really positive about that. I'm sure Bastion will be able to fill us in when we talk about Beast in Velvet next week. That's what I want to take a look at, in addition to Bretonnia. Not that it take place in Bretonnia thing, but Genevieve is Bretonian, so at least it fits that way. But yeah, otherwise, if you're here watching this or listening, you know that we have all kinds of stuff going on here, the Professional Casual Network. Sundays, of course, is the show, Grimstream Perilous Lore. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to join us Sundays at 1 Eastern Standard Time for the live stream at Professional Casual, or twitch.tv/Professional Casual Network. And then Mondays, we have the Lost Omens podcast, which is our Pathfinder 2 actual play run by the awesome Danny. I don't have to say awesome just because she's my wife, but I say it anyway because she does a great job. And we have a ton of fun there. She is running us through the Extinction Curse adventure path, and it is a blast. It's so much fun. All of our face hurts by the halfway through an episode from laughing so much. So you can enjoy that with us and laugh along with us. Monday nights right here on this Twitch, we have, the Power Phase, where we play Marvel Crisis Protocol, the best miniature game to come out since Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I'm saying it right now. And it's just a great time playing with Marvel characters, rolling dice, getting mad at them, getting mad at each other. Not really. It's just super fun. Sometimes it's frustrating when the dice don't do what you want them to do, but it's a great time. We have a lot of interaction with chat, which is great, and it's super fun. And you haven't checked that out yet, take a look, because you don't have to know how to play the game to have a good time listening. Same with Lost Omens. Just hang out with us and have fun. Tuesdays is day of the week. Wednesdays is our Patreon kind of appreciation day, where we have bonus Patreon content in addition to all the video for all of our shows is on Patreon as well. The day that the podcast goes up for Lost Omens, Gapapa, Elite 8, there is also video on the Patreon that same time. On Wednesdays, we drop extra content. We got things like, Wait, Did I Roll Wild? Our just kind of chatting about Crisis Protocol vlog. Features me, Tim, and Charlie so far. I think Danny will get in there here and there as well since she started playing that game. And we've got vlogs. Danny does book reviews whenever she finishes a book, which is pretty regularly because she reads a lot faster than I do. We've got extra content from Big Chuck. I think he's bringing back his tasty treats that he used to do on Instagram, where he tries different snack foods and talks about it. And he's really funny, so it's a great time. Tim does updates for the network here and there on there. Sometimes we have extra bonus stuff, like after the show was done recording, but Tim just doesn't stop hitting record, which can be really fun and just weird stuff that we talk about. And lots of stuff there. That'll also be where the Settling the Southlands campaign will be, because that'll be for patrons at the $10 tier and above. Will get access to the Settling the Southlands podcast and video versions. Thursday is my favorite day of the week, is a Grim podcast of Perilous Adventure podcast and video on the Patreon. Podcast for everybody, that is free. Our Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, actual play, where we're playing through The Enemy Within. We've just recently begun Death on the Reich, and it's been awesome. That show has evolved quite a bit from the beginning, where we didn't know what we were doing. I want to play Warhammer. We started this podcast network, and I want to play WFRP. Let's do a show on that. And it's become this awesome thing that people love, and I love to talk about it, and it's just the best time. Whew. I ran out of breath for a second there. Friday is Chuck and Tim doing Elite 8 Showdown, where they talk about all kinds of stuff in a single elimination bracket. This past week was just the other day was the greatest show to only have one season, which was given to them, the whole bracket broken down to them from Joe Gennaro of the Comic Book Rundown podcast that we have an awesome relationship with. He's a cool dude. Um, Super fun, super funny show. Don't listen with your kids because it's not appropriate, but it's just all over the place and a great time. Saturday is also a day of the week, and then we're back to Sunday, where we have this good old thing here. So thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. Bastion, you're the man in the chat. And otherwise, I will see you guys next week with Bretonnia, and I'll be here splitting a screen with Bastion himself. So otherwise, keep gaming. Have a good time. See ya.